When most of the meditation teachers give advice, they usually tell meditators to start by mindfulness with the body. So there are various ways of doing this kind of practice. One of the most common is the 32 parts of the body. But it's not necessarily recommended for people who don't have regular guidance. If they don't have a meditation teacher to ask guidance from, then often we'll ask them to start with a different subject. So another popular subject is anapanasati, or mindfulness of breathing. And so this one it's quite popular and quite suitable. Some yogis, some meditators find it's not that easy for them to develop. And so then they must go to a different section. So we have various different ways of doing this mindfulness of the body. And we had a few questions this week about mindfulness of the body regarding the 4 elements in the body. And so I thought we would go through some systematic instruction and some quotes from some teachers about this meditation object, some modern teachers. And then we'll also go through some related contemplations of the 4 elements that help us deal with the 8 worldly dhammas that change and cause us difficulties in life. So just as an introduction, or maybe back up a step, one of the common ways that the Buddha has given this teaching is regard to the 30 parts of the body. And so, for example, in Maharahula Vada Sutta, the Buddha explains for Venerable Rahula to check what parts of the body are more solid. For example, the hair or the bones or the teeth. And then these have a predominance of what he calls the earth element. And then similarly, elements, parts such as blood or urine, they are more predominant in the water element. And then the warmth in the body, the digestive fire, this is all coming under the heat element. And then the air in the cavities in the body, for example, in the stomach or in the bowels. This kind of thing is counted as the wind or air element. So for somebody doing that practice of the 32 parts of the body, then it's very helpful to practice that way. But for beginners or for people who want something more visceral, then there's a different way to practice the 4 elements. And so this way is given it's mostly based on the instructions in the Visuddhimagga. But modern teachers who are teaching it are not necessarily coming from that basis. If you start paying attention to the body, just the postures of the body, then naturally you'll discern these elements to some extent anyway. So we'll read some quotes from different teachers about this. But just to give an introduction to what these elements are in a more visceral sense, how they're felt in your body, we'll give the example of making a clay bowl. So if you have a potter's wheel, for example, and then you can imagine you have a piece of clay there spinning, and then your hands are on the clay, and then you have to periodically put water on it, or there's like a spout or something to put the water on, and then so you have this a bit heavy lump of clay, and then as it spins you can feel it in your hands as you're shaping it, and then at first it's not so smooth, it's a bit bumpy, but it becomes smoother and smoother, and then as the water goes sort of as it keeps spinning and it takes on its proper shape. And so you can feel the heaviness, you can feel the water on your hands as well. Maybe it feels a bit cool when the water comes, but then the inside of the palms of your hand are slowly getting warm from the motion, from the friction of the spinning. And then later you have a nicely shaped flower vase, clay flower vase or a pot. And then after that it's quite soft. Maybe you put some kind of ornaments on it. If you're in Thailand, they like to put this, well, I don't know the exact designs, but a Thai design, or in Sri Lanka they have different designs they put on. Australia, you have your own designs. And so then you put your designs on, your glaze, and then you put it in the kiln. And then after it's been fired, now it's no longer soft, it becomes very hot. It's very hard, very hard. And so then the original piece of clay, this lump of clay, has been transformed by a series of processes into a new item. So we can see when we were doing that, then we experienced the four elements in our bodies, and we experience them by inference externally from the nature of the clay. And so we have the earth element, and so the earth element is the element that holds things together. Sorry, it's said to be sort of the basis for the other elements. And so then we have the water element and the heat element, and then the wind element here is coming through the motion of the pot as it is spun. So if you have very, very high Paṭhavī and you contemplate making the pot, then maybe you can understand impermanence and develop your mind very quickly, but most of us have to develop more systematically than that. So for the rest of us, we can understand these things by example, some of the qualities of the four elements, just as an introduction, and then we can look systematically in our body for these different elements. So we can follow the 6 different characteristics of the earth element. We can start by, usually we start by mindfulness of postures. So if somebody's really new to meditation on the body, then they have to start by paying attention to the sensations in their body as they're walking, as they're sitting, as they extend their arm, contract their arm, when they're eating, when they're lying down. And then only finally then they might sit down and try to pay attention to their main meditation object, whether it's the parts of the body or Buddhanusati or whatever object it might be. So I'll just read a quote from the Satipatthana Sutta here, Majjhima Nikaya, number 10, translation by Venerable Sudaso. Monks. A monk considers this body, however it is positioned or directed, as composed of elements. In this body there is the earth element, the water element, the heat element, the wind element. Monks, just as a skilled butcher or apprentice butcher, after killing a cow and slicing it into pieces, might sit at a crossroads, in the same way, monks, a monk considers this body, however it is positioned or directed, as composed of elements. In this body there is the earth element, the water element, the heat element, the wind element. In this way, one abides observing the body as the body internally, or one abides observing the body as the body externally, or one abides observing the body as the body both internally and externally, or one abides observing the nature of manifestation in relation to the body, or one abides observing the nature of cessation in relation to the body, or one abides observing the nature of both manifestation and cessation in relation to the body. Or mindfulness that there is the body is established to the extent necessary for knowledge and awareness, and one abides independent, and one does not cling to anything in the world. Monks, in this way a monk abides observing the body as the body. So we have this instruction is actually quite brief, although it took a moment to read. But the Buddha has included a lot of instructions here about the arising of the elements, the passing of the elements, observing them in the body, or we can just be mindful of the elements. So if we want to, for those people who have a more analytic mind, one way they can do this is by starting when they sit down, they can start scanning the body from the soles of the feet to the tips of the head. And there are 12 characteristics that are listed. Traditionally, we have 12 characteristics for these elements, 6 for the earth element. So for the earth element, we have roughness, smoothness, heaviness, lightness, hardness, and softness. So we mentioned these. You already have felt them in your mind when you're contemplating about the pot. So for the water element, we have flow and cohesion. For the fire element, we have heat and cold, and then for the wind element, we have pushing and supporting. So you can start by scanning the body and choosing one of these characteristics and try to understand which one is clear to you. Now there's a traditional order that we can follow, but if you just start with which one's clear, it's also possible. So for example, you find that it's a hot day, heat is clear, so you can focus on the heat in the body. And so scanning through the body, wherever you feel heat, you just understand that this heat is there. At this stage, no need to pay attention, especially to rising and passing, or try to find the exact location of the heat. But you'll find as you go, your understanding of this heat element will become more and more clear. So we have later, different kinds of perceptions can start to arise. Maybe it might feel like the heat increases in the body, or some other element might start to be more prominent. So the heat might start to flicker and things like this, so that we can say this is the wind element. So you can start with which one of the characteristics is clear, and then move on to the next characteristic. So imagine you have 2 weeks to practice this. You have one sitting meditation a day, so you can start by each day you can add one element. So one characteristic. So the first day you did heat for your mindfulness practice, and then you can add the heaviness. And so then you try to discern heaviness, and then you can go together with the heat. So you can discern as you sweep through the body, heaviness, and then heat, like that. Now some of the characteristics might not be so clear. If there are a couple of them that you can't discern clearly, then you can just gloss them over or skip them. You don't have to do them in full detail. So we won't go through each of these 12 characteristics in so much detail, but the basic process is if you cannot discern it at first, you should do something to make it prominent. So often people, when they sit down and try to do this, they have trouble discerning either smoothness or roughness. So you can, for example, run your tongue over your teeth, over the tips of your teeth to feel roughness, or you can press your fingers against something smooth to just try to feel some smoothness. These kinds of techniques help you to discern in the beginning. As the mind becomes more sensitive, you'll be able to discern more clearly. So going through each of these systematically over the course of days, then you can come to the 12. Then when you get to all 12 and you feel you can discern, say at least 9 of them clearly, maybe 2 or 3 of them are not as easy to discern. At that point, instead of sweeping through the body, you can try to observe them in the body as a whole, wherever they're manifesting. So they'll be arising and passing in different parts of the body. Now, I wanted to read a quote. So this particular method is very similar to the one that's taught by Venerable Paṭhavī-dhātu in Myanmar, and he has some comments about what happens at this stage, and then also Ajahn Thanissaro has some comments about 4 elements. So we'll just read Paṭhavī-dhātu's comments first, and then after we'll discuss Ajahn Thanissaro's comments. This is from his Mindfulness of Breathing and 4 Elements meditation booklet. When you can discern all 12 characteristics clearly throughout the body, from head to feet, you should continue to discern them again and again in the same order. Then he's going to say what I just said, some of what I said. While practicing in this way, the elements will, for some meditators, not be balanced. Some elements may become excessive and unbearable, particularly hardness, heat, and pushing can become excessively strong. If this occurs, you should pay more attention to the quality opposite the one that is in excess, and continue to develop concentration in that way. You may find that this will balance the elements again, and it is for this reason 12 characteristics were taught in the first place. When the elements are balanced, it's easier to attain concentration. For balancing the elements, the opposites are hardness and softness, roughness and smoothness, heaviness and lightness, flowing and cohesion, heat and coldness, and supporting and pushing. If one member of these pairs is in excess, balance it by paying attention to its opposite. For example, if flowing is in excess, pay more attention to cohesion. Or if supporting is in excess, pay more attention to pushing. The rest can be treated in a similar way. So, for those who are not familiar with this kind of meditation, the perceptions that arise when you're meditating a bit intensively can be quite strong. So some people feel like their bodies become very hard like a rock, or some people feel like very strong tension, that they feel like some kind of tension in their forehead. Some people can feel different kinds of heat sensations. Now, if they just persist for a short time and they disappear, then that's quite fine. Then you're practicing the Buddha's recommendation for this object. But if you get up from your meditation and you still feel like, oh, my joints all ache and they're all hard or something like this, then this is more like what Venerable Sayadaw-ji is talking about here. Then it's important to try to balance the situation. So if such a thing were to happen, then you should either consult a teacher, or you can try the methods that he has mentioned here, but paying attention to the opposite. And we'll talk a bit more about this when we get to Ajahn Thanissara's quote. Sayadaw-ji is explaining to do this with the 12 characteristics. Ajahn Thanissara is explaining to do it after you've collapsed them back into the 4 elements. And so that's the next step of the meditation, to go to the 4 elements proper. So once you've understood all six characters of earth, then you can just contemplate earth. And so you can continue as you were doing before in the whole body, but instead of discerning the one by one, all 12 of them, you start just by discerning earth, as in wherever this quality of earth is prominent in the body, or where the quality of wind or fire or water is prominent. So when you're doing this, this object it can be taken in different directions, but if you're practicing in this way, then slowly, then many different kinds of experiences can arise. Some people can feel like the body changes into some kind of weird shape or something like that. Again, it's not a problem if you get these kind of perceptions, as long as when you get up from your meditation, then normal perception returns. But eventually the mind will start to become very balanced, and then it will be like the body starts to fill with light. And so then the awareness will be filling the body. The awareness of these kinds of the sensations that are connected with these elements will also be there. But then this light will become brighter and more sparkling. And at that time, then we get to a point where the mind is very balanced. And so this is a very useful kind of concentration level. And this is similar to, like, some meditators were trying to get this kind of experience by focusing on their breathing, but they couldn't get there. So in this way, they're able to get to a level of concentration where they can focus for a longer period of time. The mind is very calm and the body is comfortable for a longer period of time. So at that point, then the next direction in the meditation depends a little bit on the meditator and on the teacher. But for today, we're going to discuss what would happen up to this point. And now, Ajahn Thanissaro talks about using this meditation on the 4 elements for dealing with pain and for dealing with other experiences. So we'll just read what he has to say from his book, With Each and Every Breath, available at his site, dhammatalks.org. So he's doing this in conjunction with the breathing meditation. So he's saying after the mind has become concentrated on the breath in the body and very stable, then one might try to do this. When you've learned to maintain this sense of balanced stillness in the breath, you can focus on balancing the other properties of the body as well. First, balance the heat and the cold. If the body feels too warm, notice where the coolest spot in the body is. Focus on the coolness there, and then allow it to spread, just as you'd spread the still breath. Similarly, if you feel too cold, find the warmest spot in the body, and after you can maintain your focus on the warmth there, allow it to spread. See if you can then bring the coolness and warmth into balance so that the body feels just right. Similarly with the solidity of the body. Focus on the sensations that seem heaviest or the most solid in the body. Then allow that solidity to spread through the body. If the body feels too heavy, then think of the still breath making it lighter. Try to find a balance so that you feel neither too heavy nor too light. This exercise not only makes the body more comfortable as a basis for firmer concentration, but also acquaints you with the properties that make up your inner sense of the body. As we noted in part 2, being acquainted with these properties provides you with a useful set of tools for dealing with pain and out-of-body experiences. This exercise also gives you practice in seeing the power of your perceptions. Simply noticing and labeling a particular sensation can make it stronger. So this is getting to the root of why meditation on the 4 elements in this method, this sort of mode is very valuable. And that's because it gives us some kind of way, something that we can do with our mindfulness that will actually affect our body and our mind. So we're not only observing, then to some extent we can adjust. And so if we have a lot of pain and we're observing this way and we're able to balance the body a little bit, it's quite possible that the mind will also become more balanced and will experience more peaceful state of mind. And so all of us are going to be forced to cope with these things in life. And so this leads on to the next section. So if you're practicing these 4 elements as mindfulness of the body, then this is sort of the basic instructions. It would take some time to do all of that. But there's another set of instructions where the Buddha is talking about using these 4 elements as similes. So now that we've become more familiar with the 4 elements, then we can use these similes that the Buddha has given us in order to keep our mind balanced in the face of difficulties in life. And so this is in the face of the 8 loka dhammas. So what are the 8 loka dhammas? I'll just read. Sadness, happiness, sukha, dukkha. Gain and loss, labha, labha. Fame and infamy. I'm sorry? Fame and infamy, gain and loss, pleasure and pain, and praise and blame. Yeah, praise and blame, that's right. Yeah, so I'll just read a very short sutta on this topic. This section of the talk won't be as long. I can see it's getting too long. This translation is Anguttara Nikaya, the 8th, number 5, by Bhikkhu Bodhi, from suttacentral.net. It's available. Bhikkhus, these 8 worldly conditions revolve around the world, and the world revolves around these 8 worldly conditions. What 8? Gain and loss, disrepute and fame, blame and praise, and pleasure and pain. These 8 worldly conditions revolve around the world, and the world revolves around these 8 worldly conditions. Gain and loss, disrepute and fame, blame and praise, pleasure and pain. These conditions that people meet are impermanent, transient, and subject to change. A wise and mindful person knows them and sees that they are subject to change. Desirable conditions don't excite his mind, nor is he repelled by the undesirable conditions. He has dispelled attraction and repulsion. They are gone and no longer present. Having known the dustless, sorrowless state, he understands rightly and has transcended existence. So we have two ways of dealing with these things, these 8 worldly dhammas, with the 4 elements. And so the first is related to what we were just discussing, and that is to try to understand the connection between our body and the mind. So for example, we are facing this disrepute, then we have some kind of painful sensations in the body, and then this is going to manifest as a series of sensations that we can understand as these mere elements that are arising, passing, they're interacting with each other, and then they're coming apart. And so this is one of the ways we can try to learn to overcome when we're faced with these difficulties. We can bring our mindfulness to the body. Now, the other method, one of the other methods that we can use is given in the Mahā-Rahulovāda Sutta, which is Majjhima Nikāya number 62. And this is when the Buddha is using the 4 elements. He's suggesting that Venerable Rahula reflect on these 4 elements and make his mind similar to them. So he talks about the earth element. So in our lives, sometimes people will say rough words to us. We face difficult situations. Sometimes we get praised. Maybe we win the lottery. We have some kind of happy experience. Now, the earth doesn't care what we throw on it, right? If we throw dirt, if we pour acid on it or something like that, or if we heap piles of gold ingots, Spanish bullion on it, it doesn't care. It doesn't have any reaction. So the Buddha instructs his son, Venerable Rahula, to make his mind like the earth, to bring it into this state of equilibrium where it doesn't matter which of these things is happening. And similarly, if you prefer, you can take the analogy of water. So water, it doesn't care what it washes over, whether it's clean or dirty, ugly or beautiful. Or fire, the same, it doesn't care what it burns, or the wind, what it blows over. So by reflecting on these similes, then the Buddha is recommending that we try to bring our mind to a balanced state where we're not affected by these 8 worldly winds. Now the reason it's helpful to connect this with the first meditation is because now, after spending a long time focusing on these elements in the body, you feel a stronger sense of connection with them. You sort of have an idea what these elements are. And then and also because you've brought your concentration ability, your mindfulness and equanimity up to a certain level, then you have some kind of experience of a balanced, happy mind. And so then you don't have to sort of doubt whether it's possible to do that. So by practicing the first method and then sort of adding on the second, we have 2 tools for dealing with the difficulties we face in life. So I'll do a little, a very short New Year blessing, short blessing in Pali, and then we'll take questions after for that. Sambhitiyo vivajjantu sambharogo vinasatu Mate bhavadvantarayo sakidingayuko bhava Bhavatu sambha mangalang rakkantu sambha devata Sambha bandhanubhavena sadasoti bhavantu te Bhavatu sambha mangalang rakkantu sambha devata Sambha dhammanubhavena sadasoti bhavantu te Bhavatu sambha mangalang rakkantu sambha devata Sambha sanghanubhavena sadasoti bhavantu te.